It's 8:45, and you're all here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for sitting towards the front and not making us feel even more awkward than this room already is. But thanks for coming in and joining us early today. I know it is very early to have your brain going and be thinking about user research, so we're glad to have you. I'm Susan Wigodner from the Field Museum, and I'm here today with Jenn Phillips-Bacher and from the Wellcome Collection in London, and Desi Gonzalez from the Warhol Museum here in Pittsburgh, where we were last night. We are hashtag MCN 2017-T4, and today we're going to be talking about different ways that user research has informed the development and results of some different projects and products at our respective institutions. So we're going to go out on a limb and assume that if you came here at 8:45 today, you have a general sense of what user research is and what it can do. So a way of testing with real users and iterating to develop products that more closely satisfy users' needs and habits. I think a lot of the time we come to conferences and we talk about this great thing that we've built, and we're so excited about what the product is, but we might mention there was research that happened to get us there, but we don't talk that much about actually what the research was and the decisions that went into it along the way. So today's session is an attempt to get at some of those processes and the resulting decisions. So we're not going to talk in a lot of great detail about the final results. We'll be happy to answer questions or tell you more about a product later on, but we're going to really try to stick to different pieces of the process that helped us make decisions today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So I got really excited about this idea for an MCN session, thinking I might be a little further along in the project I was thinking about talking about. For me, that project is redesigning our website, fieldmuseum.org. So I'm going to tell you today about how we use research in addition to our internal strategy and business goals, of course, to help set and support some priorities and goals for our website redesign project. And then Desi and Jen will do a great job of talking a little bit more about particular products. So the Field Museum in Chicago. The Field Museum in Chicago is one of the largest natural history museums in the world, and 2018 will be our 125th anniversary. So we're really well known for things like Sue the T-Rex and mummies, but we have more than 30 million artifacts and specimens in our collection. We also have scientists who do research and field work every day, so are always making new discoveries, finding new species in our collections. And we are also in the process of our first rebrand in about 20 years. So our visual style is very much not super digital friendly. So it's an exciting time for us. And that includes updating our mission, which now focuses on fueling a journey of discovery to enable solutions for a brighter future. So it's very big picture. Our website, both the content and the product, is managed by the Web and Digital Communications Department. We theoretically have 7 total staff members who span from social media and content development to software development and design, but we've gone through some staff turnover in the last 6 months, and we still have a few positions that are either vacant or part-time. We are also lucky enough at the museum to have an audience insights and research manager who works in another department but really provides some good baseline knowledge for how we think about our audience, different categories that we set, and the way we talk to people. Our team works with almost every department in the building, and most departments have staff who publish content on our website with some oversight from our team, but not as much of an editorial process as we might like. So when I got to the field 2.5 years ago, it was a much more distributed model than I think we'd like to have in the future. But at the time, the team had just finished a facelift for the website, and that really focused on making the website responsible, kind of updating the visuals a little bit, like hitting some very particular priorities, but I don't think it ever really satisfied a lot of people around the building with that. So since I arrived, we've been sort of dealing with this car that our team hasn't built but is managing. And so it's a really interesting time to think about how we might change the website, but also how we communicate what we're doing around the building. So this means that staff around the Field Museum feel a lot of ownership over the website, and they have a lot of thoughts and feelings about how it should work for them. And knowing this and knowing that we wouldn't have the rebranded materials until sometime in 2017, towards the end of 2016, we worked with Kate and Troy Livingston at Expose Your Museum to develop a plan, which resulted in us using a range of methods to do some research about both our website and to talk with staff internally. So that included website pop-up surveys, an analytics review, staff discussion groups where we talked to more than 72 staff in 8 groups, and then doing some user testing. So we did 12, like about 45-minute long sessions. And then we also, it took us a little while, but we finally shared all of those reports with staff through an all-staff email, and we have them posted on the intranet. So as much as I can't tell you how many people have read them, we have been trying to be transparent and are sharing those with others. So Brad Dunn, who is our Web and Digital Communications Director, and I had been talking for a long time about taking a phased approach to the website redesign. I know that the Museum of Natural History in London did that. There are also certainly many others, and we knew that we couldn't do a whole project at once and also have time to iterate and be able to hit the kind of deadlines that were being set by our marketing team in terms of launching the rebrand in spring 2018. So one of the things that really helped us decide on how to phase our project was looking at the data that we'd gathered. So these are just analytics by site section, and I think it's pretty clear, unsurprisingly, I'm sure to most of you, if you have museum websites, that more than 60% of our users tend to visit the sections that are about visit planning most regularly. We know they're looking for details like pricing, hours, parking information, but our website is currently laid out a lot like our organizational chart. And so I think that you could argue that analytics might not be the best basis for knowing what people are actually looking for, but where they are ending up. So working with Expose Your Museum, we did some pop-up surveys, again, kind of inspired by the National Museum website Visitor Motivation Survey and some others, but really asking users, what's your top reason for visiting this website today? And we gave them sort of the standard options, so planning a visit, research or professional purposes, browsing, shopping, memberships or giving, so like a transactional option, personal interest or other. And then we used a sub-question for each category to kind of make sure that people had ended up in the right place and that we were gathering a little bit more detail. And then we also, so that's an example of that second question. And then we also asked users who answered the first question, did you find what you were looking for on the website today, after they'd been on the website for about 30 seconds. So to that question, we had about a 30% response rate of the 20,000 users, so like between 6,000 and 7,000. So not a great response rate, but not terrible for a follow-up question. And about 85% of the users who responded to that question did tell us that they found what they were looking for, which was actually pretty surprising to us considering complaints that we hear from staff and from visitors. So this is how the data from those pop-up surveys netted out. So again, we saw that people were really in that visit planning mode, but that also a lot of them visit for this kind of personal interest or browsing reason. And then we always, as I'm sure many of you guys do on your website, get a lot of traffic to our careers page and things like that. So with that data, we were able to better approach our leadership internally and say, look, you're telling us that we need to launch a site related to this rebrand by next spring, but we have more than 3,500 pages on our website. We're gonna have to really prioritize this. We can't rewrite all of that content. And so for us, that means that the clear thing that we need to be doing is focusing on our users who are planning a visit, looking for programming. We look for ways to share sort of light, like audience-friendly content or science content with them, and then we'll work like through a list going down on things that are institutional priorities because they generate revenue, and then focus on some really niche audiences who we need to build out some particular features for. And for that, for us, that means educators and people who are researchers or scientists who might want to come to the museum to do research, look at collections online, that sort of thing. And while not everyone on staff is necessarily thrilled that their section is going to take longer, the data has made it really clear that there's a reason why we're doing the project in this order, which I think as much as we could look at analytics and say that, it's been great for us to be able to have that foundation. We've also been able to use other learnings from this research to set particular goals and ways of working for the redesign. So we've thought and heard complaints for a long time that our website can be difficult to navigate. Many of our self-reported survey takers who were asked if, so that 85% of people did say that yes, they found what they were looking for, but we also had a lot of people who didn't, and sometimes that information is really prominent on our site. Like, I just want to know how late you're open today. And so we saw that users really use search when we asked them to complete a particular task. They took the navigation language really, really literally. And we think that user-focused site architecture and content is really important. And so we really did see that coming through in our user results. And so we were able to put those pieces together. I think some examples, like we have a section of our site called Learning Center, which is where educators might go for resources, but it's also where field trips information is, and that's one of those things where it seems like our users are much more likely to want to navigate to plan a visit because that's what they're trying to do versus that learning center category. So that's the kind of stuff we'll be looking at. It was also clear from our analytics, from the pop-up surveys, just from talking to people, that we needed to prioritize this easy access to visit-related content. But a big learning for us was this need to forefront pricing and exhibition date information to help users more readily find what they need. We'll have an exhibition page, and then we'll like send you off to our offsite ticketing platform, and we're not letting people understand as they're looking at an exhibition, this is how much it's going to cost me to visit it. Our ticketing structure is a little bit of a challenge on its own that we're going to have to work through separately, but figuring out how we can represent that in a way that's a little bit more discernible for users is really top of mind for us. And then one of our big institutional goals for the field is to help our visitors and users understand that our collections and the research that that's happening inside the building help fuel exhibitions. And we're not always sure that they care about this, but institutionally we really want to try, and we do see a lot of interest in science content. So, but for us, knowing that about a quarter of our users classify their reason for visiting as personal interest or browsing, or that they were interested in the collections but maybe wanted a more user-friendly way to access them, kind of speaks to that idea. And so I think we're pretty committed to trying that out as a big goal moving forward on our site. So finally, and causing me probably the most stress, were these staff discussion groups that we did. And some feedback was really clear and related to the strategic goals for the museum, and some really was not. There are a lot of different priorities internally. We have many, many staff members, lots of opinions. So I think as hard as it was for me sometimes to be reading some of this feedback, it helped me understand some of the things about how we need to work and share information about our project internally. So we came up with a set of guiding principles. So design integrity, ease of use, consistency, communication, and accessibility and inclusivity that we really are sharing with colleagues around the building as a way of framing the work that we're doing and giving them a sense of that. So suffice it to say that some of the quotes you might read, and we'll post the slide, we'll tweet out the slides after this, but are somewhat contradictory. So my favorite combination here is about communication. So someone said in these staff discussion groups, I've noticed that on certain pages someone will add content, and that same content will be on an entirely separate page, but you go back to update it, you may not think to update the second page that has that content. And then someone else said, well, we have a lot of different people doing a lot of different things, and at some level, I know this leads to chaos, but that's what we ought to be celebrating with respect to the website. So that's what I'm working with here. But, so I think that the thing that's interesting is that staff are really actually recognizing that there is duplicative content on the website, and by extension, the editorial process that we have or do not have is not working. But some people think that chaos is okay. And so I might not agree with some of those perspectives, but knowing that that's the baseline where we're starting, and that some people are going to be really challenged by this idea of a more stringent editorial process, helps us understand that, like, we need to plant this seed early. We need to have a lot of conversations about it. We need to make sure that people feel like they're being heard over the course of the process, and really look for ways to make the research give us tools to work with them. And we know that we have to implement a stronger editorial process right now. I'm sure that there is content on the website that no one looked at once before the person who typed it into the CMS pushed it live. But we're gonna try to change that, and for a lot of reasons, I think, in terms of voice and tone, in keeping with the rebrand, but also for accessibility. I just can't have people using, like, the header styles that they want in the order that they think looks pretty, because that is not how accessibility should work. But that's something that we have to continue to communicate. So we're hoping that this will help us understand our colleagues a little bit better. But we also, I think for me, it was a big learning that I probably will not succeed at making everyone happy with this website redesign, but that by focusing on our users and trying to be more transparent, continuing to communicate, and trying to do the best job that we can on behalf of the institution, that's sort of what we can work towards. And so we are just in the beginning of this process. We're hoping to launch the first phase of our updated site in, like, April or May of next year. It's very fingers crossed at this point. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen to talk about some of the great work that her team is doing in London.
All right, let me get set up here quickly. I feel like I should rename my presentation "Stakeholders Be Damned." All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Jenn Phillips-Bacher, and I'm a product manager for Welcome Collection in London. This is my first ever MCN, so thank you everyone for being so nice and for showing up so early. This morning, I'm going to talk about a concept and a product that we built a few years ago, and which we're now reviving with a whole slew of new ideas and research methods. But first, a brief introduction to Welcome Collection. Welcome Collection is a free museum and library based in London. Inspired by the collections of pharmaceutical baron Henry Wellcome, we encourage new ways of thinking about health by connecting science, medicine, life, and art. What that means practically is that we run an eclectic mix of programs, from temporary exhibitions on topics like death, recreational drugs. Our current exhibition, Can Graphic Design Save Your Life? Yes, it can. And we also have permanent installations and exhibitions relating to the history and the now of medicine. For more than 10 years, we've been digitizing our library collections and putting them online for free. So that gives us a lot of really great content to work with, both in our in-venue program and our online program. We are currently redesigning and redeveloping our whole digital platform, and it's given us an opportunity to look back at some projects we've done in the past and start to improve on those. So a bit about our team, how we're organized. I head up a small empowered product team. We've got 3 developers, UX designer, a user analyst, a visual designer, and me, the product manager. And we work really closely with all of our colleagues in the digital content, platform production, and photography teams. Of course, we couldn't do any of this without the support of all of our colleagues in collections, program, exhibitions, publishing. And it kind of sounds ideal, but it wasn't always this way. So Digital Stories version 1, which may have made the rounds a few years ago in this circle, was a pair of exciting, visually rich, immersive long-form stories that were published in late 2014. Our goal with these was to create something to help bring non-specialist audiences, the general public, exhibition goers, closer to Wellcome Library's digital collections. In terms of KPIs, we were looking to expand our international reach and to cultivate an online audience who would stick with us for the long term and visit us again and again. So for this team, this project, my colleagues assembled a project team. They hired a really well-regarded digital agency, and they got to work building this framework for long-form storytelling. We built 2 6-chapter stories that used audio, video, and animation to support the storytelling. This is an example of one, The Collectors, and Mindcraft was the second. They're really beautiful. They're still up online. You can see them. They're really beautiful experiences. They work really, really well on tablets. But the approach that we took for this was kind of determined by organizational impetus. We had a budget, but what we didn't have was a way to sustain the product or any internal staff expertise. We did the big design up front, which is kind of a problem, I think. And there was no user research that was done during the concept stage or the build stage. The design and development work was done by agency staff and freelancers. And then we commissioned another agency to do a summative evaluation of it at the end. This summative evaluation was comprised of usability testing and interviews with 23 people, and a pretty thorough review of Google Analytics data. But this year, we brought digital stories back to life, nevertheless. The conditions under which we've done so have been massively influenced by that summative evaluation. I think that summative evaluation really pushed us to think about sustainability and how we have the right skills in-house to make things like this to begin with. So remembering that one of our organizational goals was to increase visibility and engagement with digital library collections, at the end of each chapter, which you can see highlighted in orange, we included a Find Out More in Wellcome Library module. And this showed readings that were related to the story, to that specific chapter. And if you click on any of the items at the bottom, it would open up our digital viewer to read the full text. People responded really poorly to this, unsurprisingly, and it got very little usage across both digital stories. That Find Out More within that narrative is a real distraction. It takes away from the story quite a bit. This is what happened when you clicked on one of those books. Opens up the overlay showing the full text cover to cover source material, and non-specialist audiences, unsurprisingly, not interested in this at all. And it was clear that this type of format isn't the place to try to convert readers into researchers. Also, at the end of each chapter, we featured an element that would take you on to the next chapter or the next story. But the research found that the call to action to move to the next story wasn't strong enough, and we needed to build something that would really usher readers into the next phase more logically. And people were also unsure about how they might learn about new stories. We can see from the usage data there was very little deep engagement with the stories. 69% visited only 1 or 2 chapters, and fewer than 5% read a whole story in one sitting. So I like to think of these summative evaluations as a big to-do list in waiting. For version 1 digital stories, we couldn't incorporate any of that feedback because we didn't have a way to deal with the code base. We didn't have access to the skills and resources to do so. But the evaluation gave us a lot to rethink, including our publishing cycle, the position of these stories in relationship to the rest of the website, notification options, and the role of supplementary content when we're trying to create a narrative experience. And so this research really inspired how we went on to pick up digital stories in the next phase. So 2016, we've got a new product team, and because we've got a product team working together in-house, we can tackle the problems ourselves and bite off smaller chunks of work. As an agile team, lowercase agile, we're working toward continuous discovery. We learn as we build. Because of this, we're able to be much more nimble in our approach to user research, and we kind of do things, I think of things as small batch testing, which are those tests that we run just to let us know whether we're on the right track, and large batch testing, which are the ones where we require larger sample sizes and that we might run in some more automated way to get the numbers. We decided that we wanted to keep the 6-chapter format and that we would publish one story a week, and that we would continue to use the historical content from our collections, but there was no expectation here to drive research use. And we also want to redesign the format so that there's a strong sense of place within that story. So that's just an overview of what we've done. I want to talk through a few specific methods that we've used now, and one of those is A/B testing. Both A/B testing and prototypes really help us make decisions about how to build the new digital stories. So as we learned from earlier research, it's really important that we get that chapter navigation right. We wanted to learn, first of all, which kind of navigation was more likely to give us a good baseline for usability. So our designers came up with 2 alternative story menu options. There's this drop-down, which didn't animate it there. I should have done a GIF, I didn't. And a more traditional horizontal scroll bar. We prototyped this using an app called Principle for Mac, and we loaded those prototypes onto iPads, took them down to the galleries, and talked to 6 participants for about 20 minutes each, where we showed them both prototypes. This is the one that shows the scrolling navigation, which is more like what you can actually see on the site now. We found that the horizontal pattern was more swipey, and thus a more intuitive pattern, and it's something that all 6 participants picked up straight away. This is the one that we started building and iterating on. Once we built the horizontal navigation, we wanted to test alternative navigation states. So either the navigation disappears as you scroll up the page, or it sticks to the top of your browser. We wanted to know what role the sticky navigation would play in getting people to read. Does that navigation distract, or does it put people off of the reading in any way? So we ran an A/B test using Google Optimize, which is their new A/B testing platform that ties in nicely with Google Analytics. We ran the A/B test on devices with a viewport of less than 600 pixels, getting really specific here, mostly mobile devices. And we split the traffic 50-50. Half of the users got the sticky version, the other half got the non-sticky. We monitored scroll depth, so readers getting to 75% of the way through the screen, and also monitored bounce rate. And it was a bit surprising to me. I kind of assumed sticky would win. Sticky was a big loser in this scenario. The non-sticky version had a much higher read rate and much lower bounce rate. So in the end, we decided to just keep it non-sticky, which reduces code complexity, which is good for developers. They're happy with that. And that we would come back later and retest it on wide screens. Third example is a quick and dirty prototype that was meant to help us answer the question of whether people would sign up for email notifications for new chapters. We launched this test on mobile devices only, because that's where most of the traffic was coming from. And we used MailChimp's free account to collect email addresses. We ran the experiment for 3 weeks. We had 9 signups. 5 of those were staff. But we carried through with the test. Every week when a new story was published, we would send out the MailChimp email and observe the click-through rate and the open rate for the email, and then watch how many people would actually click through from that email. The click-through rate from those emails for those 4 non-staff readers was very poor, 0% one week, 29% another week. So in the end, we're parking it. We're not going to touch email notifications for a while until we start to build up more recognition of the digital story format, and maybe we can try it on a few stories, try it in a few different ways, see if anything sticks. So A/B testing and cheap prototypes may help us hone in on a decision, but often we need to supplement this testing with more qualitative feedback to understand why something is happening and to refine further. So once we'd published our first version 2 digital story, which was called Electric Sublime, we wanted to find out how people perceived the content and how they were using the interface as we'd built it. Do readers know what to expect from a digital story? Can they easily navigate it? We did 6 intercept interviews, again in the gallery spaces, and we asked questions relating to the concept and watched them use the site. Got a lot of good quotes. Well, what's an analog story? And some questions about what readers were to expect from the content of these stories. As a result of this testing, actually, the editorial team thought about this really quickly and decided for the next digital story that would be published, which was called The Outsiders, that they would change the way they would tweak how they were writing each of those chapter titles. So instead of titles which were kind of punny and funny to us, like Eels and Feels and Thunderbolts and Lightning, very, very frightening, we went with things like The Stranger Who Started an Epidemic, The Prostitute Whose Pox Inspired Feminists. So it gives you a much better sense of what that story contains. So I've just given you a handful of examples today, and I hope that this shows that you can take small steps towards a goal using these small batch methods, prototyping, and low-risk experimentation to improve your digital products over time. By trying to frame our design challenges as learning opportunities, what happens when we do this? It helps us to be open to getting lots of ideas, lots of design ideas that we can test with users. And also it means that sometimes we learn it's better to just not do something at all. And that's a good thing, because we've got enough on our plates. So we're quite happy with that. As for Welcome Collection, our goal is to not have a final product, but we use user research to make decisions better as a team and as an organization, and also to make better, higher quality decisions that will work for our users. So that's it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Desi. Thank you.
You don't mind if I lean over? Hi, everyone. I'm Desi Gonzalez. I am the manager of digital engagement at the Andy Warhol Museum. It was very exciting to welcome everyone last night at our museum. Hopefully you had a chance to see the collection. We're located here in Pittsburgh, which is where Warhol was born, and we hold the largest collection of Warhol's artworks and archival materials in the world. And I want to show you our digital team. Which is just me. I'm a department of one. So in this role, I wear many hats at different moments. I might be a strategist at one moment, a project manager, a media producer, content developer, interactive designer, user researcher, all on different days. And I am part of a newly formed tiny department called Strategic Initiatives. I do often get support from IT, which is shared across the 4 Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. And I work, like Susan, I work with departments across the museum to make these things happen, including learning and public engagement, marketing and communications, and rights and digital imaging, just to name a few. And in my role, I'm responsible for our websites, any mobile or audio experiences, gallery interactives, and digital signage. So with that in mind, I'm going to be presenting on two projects that we've done and how we've incorporated user research. It's going to be kind of just a snapshot. I'm not going to go super in depth, but just show you one through line of the research. And the first is Out Loud, which is our inclusive audio guide. So we launched Out Loud last year as a kind of beta format. It's available to all users, but it's designed in conjunction with the visually impaired community in Pittsburgh. So some of the features that make this iOS-based app accessible to users with visual impairments include our location awareness system using Bluetooth beacons. It's also optimized for use with Apple's voice-over screen reader. And instead of siloing our interpretive content, or kind of our like visual description as a separate tour, we're providing modular content that interweaves our interpretive content with content designed for accessibility. And then finally, our audio guide, it's kind of hard to see this image actually, but it can be used in conjunction with our tactile reproductions that hopefully you saw on floors 4 through 7 last night at the museum. So when we set out to develop Out Loud, we knew that user research really had to be at the part of this process. We wanted to build something that really responded to the needs of this very particular audience of the visually impaired community. So perhaps the biggest resource were the 3 user experts that we worked with throughout the process. They're community members who are blind or have low vision, and we looked for a broad range of age, degree of visual impairment, or type of visual impairment, and comfort with technology. And we worked with them at every stage. We also formed an advisory team that included staff stakeholders, including 1 senior staff member, a development officer who fundraised for the project, and also an outside member who runs a startup focusing on voice interfaces, and he himself has a visual impairment. So we met with them monthly. We often met with them a week after we conducted a usability test with the user experts. So then we were able to run the same kind of usability test with them and then share what we had learned in the previous session. And then finally, we engaged a local group that organizes on meetup.com, the accessibility meetup, and they meet monthly to foster dialogue on how to make Pittsburgh a more accessible and welcoming place, often through technology. They range in types of disabilities and comfort with technology. And so once development was pretty far along, but we weren't ready to quite launch, we hosted a meetup at our museum to test out the app. So we had all sorts of methodologies, and these are kind of the main ones: interviews, paper, and interactive prototypes, and usability tests. And before we drew a single mock-up or wrote a line of code, we conducted interviews with these user experts to learn what makes a good museum experience, how they use technology, and what kind of audio experiences they find meaningful. So from those initial interviews, we developed a set of design principles that would guide us through our design and development process, and that we would continually refer back to. So this chart outlines these principles, how they directly came from something we heard in the interviews, and then the design decisions we made. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to highlight kind of one thread there. And we heard from a user expert that she wanted a little more independence in a museum visit, that she was hoping that this Out Loud that we were building would allow her to not have to be able to have her own choice, make her own decisions when she was here. We heard from someone else that they were interested in learning about how an artwork was made, whereas other people wanted to learn about the social context around a work of art. So we were hearing this thing that people really wanted to be able to personalize their visit and have some choice in but at the same time be kind of guided, right? So we developed this design principle to provide a path with a choice. And one of the ways that this manifested in practice was that we ended up splitting up our audio guide into these smaller modular chunks of audio and allowed visitors to dive deeper if they want to learn more. So with that in mind, an audio guide, you usually type in a number and listen to an audio about one artwork. Because we're doing smaller chunks that all related to one tour stop, we needed a new interface. So we started thinking about, okay, what would that mean for us? These are some initial concepts. The first two screenshots are one concept. The second two relate to the second one. And on the left, you see our first prototype, which is based on a card design concept. One card appears at a time. It reveals the audio player controls, and when the audio stops, the card will then animate out to reveal another possible option. On the right side, we have, totally on all the way to the right is our prototype based on the third screen, which is the Quartz News app. And the Quartz News app, we were excited about it because it delivers short and witty chunks of news at a time in an interface that looks like an iMessage almost. You get to select if you want to learn more. And we love the conversational and whimsical and playful tone. So we created a prototype that was in this vein. And during testing, we found that changing the cards in our prototype 1 was actually really confusing to our users with visual impairments. We were always switching up where the buttons are, right? Your player controls. In the second prototype, they liked the player controls were static at that bottom bar, and they also liked that as you went along in your journey, we had some people who had low vision, for example, and they liked that we surfaced the audio transcript and that you could get a sense of everything you had listened to already. So we ended up actually designing something based on that research that actually looked kind of totally different. We dropped that conversational interface, even though we were really excited about it, and instead just surfaced all of the available content as a list. It might feel a little less whimsical, but it was really much more straightforward to use. You can toggle open transcripts using the transcript button, and people like that you could see everything all at once and be able to choose what chunks of content you're diving into. Okay, so that's a quick snapshot of one thread of taking user research into action for our Out Loud audio guide. I also want to quickly, and I know we're running out of time, so this might be a whirlwind, highlight another project. Was that just this year we redesigned Warhol.org. So these are screenshots of our website before and after the redesign. And we did a total overhaul of the site. We switched to a new backend CMS. We redesigned the front end, and we redid our information architecture and content entirely. We were particularly focusing on redesigning the website as a communications tool for audiences planning to come to the museum or come to an event. And the types of user research we did, we used this usertesting.com platform. I'm happy to talk to you about that later if you're interested in learning more, but I'm not focusing on that today. We did personas and journey maps, usability testing, and this is just the qualitative research. It doesn't include looking at our analytics and surveys. So I mentioned 2 seconds ago that we were focusing on the website redesign as a communications tool, people coming on site to the museum. There are actually a lot of different types of people that are coming on site for many reasons. So we developed 7 user personas to embody these different reasons and needs. And I'm just going to point out a few. Our tourist is the first one. So this is someone who's like a national or international audience, seeing a visit to the Warhol as a pilgrimage site. Even though it's only one of our 7 profiles, this actually represents maybe 50% of our visitors to our site and to the museum. Other groups, people you might not expect, are a researcher planning to come dig into our archives, a local family who's never been to the Warhol, but that we want to convert them into visitors, and our teen. I'm going to focus on our teen. So we fleshed out these 7 user personas into full-blown profiles that include particular goals, motivations, and limitations. So our teen is Alex, and they identify as gender non-binary, and they don't see their identity reflected in social circles at their public school, but they're looking to connect to others. So they've been learning about Warhol in art classes, and their teacher mentions that the Warhol offers a number of teen programs, right? So Alex is the kind of person we're hoping to reach with our new website and hopefully convert them into a member of something like our Youth Advisory Council. So we took these personas and embodied their needs and desires as we ourselves used Warhol.org to try to achieve what they wanted to achieve. This is the journey map. The line kind of represents their mood at any moment. So for Alex, their teacher had told them that they might like the Warhol. They find the museum on Facebook and end up clicking through to our old website, right? They see a top navigation label that says education and dismiss it, saying that's not what they're looking for. They just don't, even though coincidentally that's where we kept all our teen program because it really reflected our org chart. Teen programs are under education. They're looking for things for queer teens and don't see it. And finally, they read about the Youth Arts Council. It sounds interesting, but it seemed like a lot of commitment. They didn't find enough information that made them feel welcome to go to this event. So they leave the site and don't end up coming to the museum. So overall, journey mapping revealed pain points for our different personas in many different ways. Sometimes it's just something didn't work on the website. Sometimes it's the nomenclature was confusing, or we didn't provide information, or we were asking for too much information in a form up front. So we were able to address many of these on our site. So because of our goal to get audiences on site to the museums, included on site for events, right? One of our major areas of focus was redesigning the calendar. And we did something that was a bit unusual for user research to inform our calendar design. We actually user tested 2 other museums' websites and calendars. We looked at the Carnegie Museum of Art, which is one of our sister institutions, and we're using the same base WordPress plugin as them. So we wanted to see how their front-end manifestation of the plugin, how people used it and what we might be able to change or improve on to serve our needs, right? And then we also looked at the Whitney Museum's calendar, and there were certain things that we really liked or were interested in their calendar, the way they surface the calendar picker and the website's nav, the way that they organize programs on the site. So just like with our out loud design principles, we took our usability testing observations and developed some learnings that we then incorporated into the calendar design. And to highlight one of them, our particular learning was that we noticed that many of our users used the homepage to get an overview of events and exhibitions at the museum. And people wanted to search by audience segmentation type. I'm this sort of person. Just like Alex saying, I want to learn about programs for teens or queer programming. But they didn't know to look in the sections that museums tend to call education or programs or learn, right? This is nomenclature they're not used to. So we decided, or the learning that came from this was that we needed to provide many ways into museum events. And that meant that we have our traditional calendar section on the museum, which aggregates all of our events and has this kind of constantly changing content. And we also have a program section on our website that includes static information, evergreen information, but then we're dynamically pulling in those calendar events into those sections. So if you were to go to the teens page, actually I'll show you in a second, it's gonna pull that in. And we also created kind of pathways for specific audiences to find information tailored to them. And this is some screenshots of what it looks like in the end. The left is kind of like scrolling halfway to the teen page, and you see us pulling in those events alongside the static information. On the right side, you have, it's a little hard to see in this, with this lighting, but on every page of our museum, we have this bar at the bottom that says visit the museum. You toggle it open and you get basic visitor information. And right at the top of that, it says looking for something specific and has 6 audience groups that we've selected to highlight. they are access educators, kids and family, LGBTQ+ members, and teens. And I'm really excited that we introduced some of these new groups that we previously hadn't surfaced on our website. Kids and families is one. People often think of Warhol as adult content and not a place. The Warhol is not a place for kids and families, but I hope that you saw last night that it's a really actually interactive and participatory museum experience that's great for kids. We also are highlighting LGBTQ+ and access on a really top level for the first time. These are two major areas of focus of ours that align with Warhol's own appreciation of difference and inclusion in his life. So we're really committed to showing that on our website. Okay, so those are just some quick snapshots about how user research informs our projects at the Warhol. These are really diverse projects with really different goals, but in both, I used user research as a way to define what we're doing, especially with such a small team, and design products that fit both our needs and those of our users.
We had talked about starting the conversation, but I think we've got about 10 minutes, and so we did want to make sure that we leave time for questions from you guys, since we could talk to each other about this extensively. Yeah.
Hi, Barry from the American Museum of Natural History. Thank you all for the presentations. Can you guys share how much laser practices you brought with you into the institution, and then how did you get buy-in around, and how much these were already valued or appreciated at the institution with respect to that?
It's a great question.
That is a good question.
Do you want to start?
I can start for that. User research was probably my predecessors had done some of it, but certainly a value that I brought into my institution. Right before coming to the Warhol, I spent 4 months in a innovation design studio in Lima, Peru, which was really cool, and kind of got a crash course in design thinking and user research methodologies, and it was just a really fantastic experience to be working in a new context that I didn't know, and then user research was a great way to learn about it. And then I got to the Warhol, and I saw that we had been working on a lot of products that often we'd work on something that people would get excited about, we'd get funders behind it, and then we'd put it out there and no one would use it, and didn't really work with any needs. And I knew we're a small team, just me. I have to build a new team every time we're doing a new project. So I started to infuse user research in everything to do to make sure that what we're doing, we can't afford to not do user research and build tools that don't have an impact.
I think for Welcome, it was, we'd been working with third-party agencies, design agencies, for so long to resource all of our digital projects. And I think the penny really dropped when we saw how much we were actually paying for short bursts of research rather than being able to do it continuously. And I think a lot of that learning has come. I think we've demonstrated to management that actually we need the user research and we need it dripping through continuously. So let's try that methodology that one agency used in a workshop with us that one time. So a lot of it is copying the work we've already paid for through agencies. And then we went through a sort of an organizational change, and that research became embedded in what we do. And we were given the opportunity to have people whose jobs have user insight and user experience in their titles. So, I mean, it wasn't an overnight change. It was about 8 years, as far as I can tell. So it took a while to get there.
I think the field actually really has a strong culture of research, but that is often scientific research and not user research, what people really want. But it really, I think, people buy into it and can use it we use it really readily as a way to share with our colleagues, this is why we're doing something a certain way. I think the challenge for us now is using research that we do, but also research about our visitors that our audience insights and evaluation team does, and actually getting the results of that research translated into actionable things around the museum when that has to do with more like on the floor visitor experience, having the ability to iterate in digital. Yeah.
Can I add one more thing? Because Barry also asked about kind of the buy-in from museum, and I actually felt that when I mentioned it out loud, we had the advisory team that we met with once a month and had them to test out our prototypes, and that was amazing kind of buy-in because they were able to see how the project progressed along. It's not like all of a sudden you launch something and they say, "Oh, why'd you do that? I would have loved it to be differently." They were really invested and understood why we made the decision. So if you're going to do user research and you want buy-in, involve other staff members in it as well.
Yeah, sorry.
Super intrigued by the Welcome to Trust example of discovering that your email marketing wasn't up to scratch and having the guts to be like, well, we may do this all day, every day at other places, but we're going to drop that. But I'm curious whether that becomes another thread that you guys want to pull on long term and examine more broadly, because Lord knows, we struggle with it where I am, where something fails in one context but maybe succeeds in another, and understanding the differences between those. These are complex systems, right? It's not just a simple application. You've got threads tying yourself to all these other systems and services. I'm just curious, with using that as an example, is there a sense that you'll need to draw more threads soon?
We are made of threads, yes. There is nothing but threads. I think one of the interesting challenges that we have with regard to the email marketing example is that, we wanted to try email notifications for editorial content, but we already have email newsletters that go out for our What's On program, so our monthly events calendar. We have a teachers and schools newsletter that goes out. We have a researcher newsletter. So to commit the organization to producing yet another newsletter, it would be a big step. If we had wild success with that experiment, that would have then forced us to pause and audit all of our other email channels. I mean, is it the right thing to do to add another email thing for everyone to use? I mean, how many newsletters can you possibly get? Should we combine that with something else? So I think every time we do an experiment, we stop and we think, are we just going to throw it in the bin and never revisit it? Are we going to revisit it because we think we need more information, or we have a gut feeling that if we'd done it slightly differently, maybe we would have had a different response? Or we say, okay, this, in an ideal scenario, this is successful. Now let us work out the mechanics of improving the whole information flow, not just this piece. So I think there are a few different ways, a few different things that could happen in that scenario. But auditing what we're doing is a constant need, I think. Did that? Hope I answered that.
Hi, I'm Aaron from the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. A question for you, Susan. Once you had done the survey, did you go back and sort of compare that to what you were getting from Google Analytics? And how did those match up or not match up? And how useful did you find analytics after you had done the survey?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. I feel like today I'm having a yes and no, but I don't know quite how to put the pieces together in a coherent way for you. I think that in a really big picture way, they were really similar. I think that for us with our analytics, it's always that grain of salt moment because you don't know the why. So it's yes, you're finding this place, but you might be coming at it through search, and then that also means that our website navigation might not be helping you get to where you're going. So it's a thing that I think we really try to tease out in a lot of different ways, which I know isn't a great answer to your question, but I think it's all kind of trying to at least put the data to where we go from here. Megan, go ahead.
I have a question for Desi.
Sure.
So wondering about how you figure out from which
Yeah.
So like having that specific quote that leads to a design decision is interesting to me, and thinking like, how are you making sure it's not like a chicken little that we're changing something because we got this one response?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Those quotes that I had up there were from in-person interviews where we were sitting down with people for a long time and are really just snapshots of a longer conversation. So in that sense, we were able to within that context, be able to know how important it was. We're often triangulating it with other, we did multiple interviews and kind of triangulating how we feel. But we do get a lot of feedback through our information at warhol.org, on Facebook, different ways that feedback about our digital products are shared with me. And often I follow up if it seems like something important or we don't know how to give it weight to. But I think you also point out something that's important to keep in mind with user research is that you don't actually have to listen to the users all the time, and you can sometimes make a decision that is, and sometimes people are going to be super friendly and like everything that you do, or you suggest things and they say like, yeah, that's great, and they're super gung-ho, and sometimes people are going to be more reticent to using things. So there is a little bit of a process. There is a decision process when you go through it, and kind of a synthesis process that you want a few minds on analyzing the user research to come up with something that both aligns with what it seems like the users want in a broader sense and what the organization needs.
All right, well, it's 9:45 exactly. So thank you guys.
Thank you.